how to remove the lens of a Pi version 1 camera. So first thing you'll notice, I'm doing this under a stereo microscope. It seems to help me, so I'd advise that. I have diagonal cutters and an X-Acto blade. So the first thing, notice this connector and the camera's loose. So we're going to turn it sideways. We're going to pinch the connector down so it doesn't pop out. And then we're going to remove the double stick tape protector. There it is. Peel that off. And so now, oopsie. There is it there. I'm using an X-Acto blade. I got that. There's the paper removed. Now the sticky's ready to go. I'm holding down on the cable, push it down, and I'm just going to push the camera straight down wherever it wants to fall. So that's going to act like a strain relief. So I'm pushing it firmly. So now it's double sticked and the connector's there. Everything's good, okay? Now there's a little tab here which protects the lens, but we're going to be chopping the lens off, so you can leave it on. I like to save the lens, you know. Someday you'll use it for something. I'm using diagonal cutters, very sharp, small ones. Now the key is there's two parts to this plastic casing. Notice there's a seam here, and it's kind of hot fused plastic to seal this. We want to remove the top part, that's this part, which has the lens hold. Here's the lens, it screws in, but they put some glue so you can't rotate it, because they fixed it to the focus they want. This is the upper part of the case. We want to remove this, but we want to leave the bottom part of the case intact because, as you'll see, this houses the image chip with all the glass on top and inside all the delicate gold bonding wires. We don't want to mess that up. So the key is to chomp away at the top. And you'll notice it'll part pretty easily because there's only about 4 spots where they hot sealed it to the top part to the bottom part. Okay, so the key to doing this is be slow and careful. Do little chunks at a time. So there's the rim. Here's the rim that is part of the threads that hold the lens in place. We're going to start chewing on that. So don't come in here and think you're going to go boop, one big chomp. Really, you want to chew. So I'm going to start chewing. It'll give you a feel. And with my left hand, I'm holding it down so I'm not putting all the strain on the glue and drilling out on the cable. I'm you can pinch it down here. Be careful you don't slip and jab yourself. So slow and steady, that's the name of the game. It's not a race. So I'm going to chew it, and notice when you start chewing just the rim, the lens is starting to pop up. That's a good sign. So chew around, and when you're almost about halfway chewing, and we move it down here, this lens just wants to pop up, and I'm going to pry it up. Now you got to be really careful that you don't let this tool, which is metal, slip inside there and scratch the glass. So again, very controlled movement. I'm prying it. Oops, it's like a loose tooth now. So I'm just going to grab it and push it away. Boom. Okay, so now the lens is good. If these little pieces of plastic fall in, no problem. They won't scratch the glass. But if your tool jabs in there, you'll scratch the glass, and that'll be a permanent mar on your microscope. So here's a little piece. I'm just going to cut that off. If it falls in, that's okay. Don't rub it against the glass. But now here's a little trick I found is if you kind of chew the corner, the right part of the blade, I'm not going to go all the way down. You just want to stay on the top part. And look at this. It even just wants to pull right off. I'm just going to get a little, you can chew it a little. I'm just going to chew that away. I'm going to chew the corner off. Just the top part. Again, don't let your blade pop in there. I'm going to put it in there a little. Work it. Chew it away. Okay, so now I chewed out that corner. I'm going to turn it sideways, chew on this part. I'm going to hold down here. Nope, see, it's like a loose, and it just wants to come off. See that whole top part? I never chewed below it. See, all my chews, I'm going to pull it out here. All the chews are done on the top half.
Now what we're going to do is mount it to the glass cover slip, and we're going to center it and then tack it with on the four corners with hot glue. And what I like to do, so I know where to put it, I'm going to put some guiding marks. The guiding marks are going to be the center, 4 lines indicating the center of the glass. Don't touch the glass. And so I'm going to be coming this way, so if I look at it, the center of the image sensor is slightly above these 2 holes. So these 2 holes, I know it'll be a little above there. And then the center here, I'm just going to mark like this. I know that's the center of that line. So that will help me once. So now I can place this on the glass. And you want to make sure the glass, let's look at it on a side profile. The highest thing here is luckily the glass and the connector are about the same height. So you should have 2 points that you can put against the glass. Okay, so basically this is going to lay here. I got my orientation lines, and just feel lightly. You can there's 2 points. If you put your finger in the center of that X, you should just lightly push it down, and you'll feel you're making intimate contact. I'm just going to turn it over, and you'll see that's what it's going to look like. Now mind you, this glass, this is your last chance, so look at the glass. I'm going to get a clean Q-tip. The thing about Q-tips is they have fibers. You don't want to get fibers. I'm just going to clean it just to make sure there's nothing on it. And this glass, I'm not even going to clean it because I just popped it off. I've just popped the lens off, so I know it's pristine. So this is the time where you want to be very careful and everything clean. This is your last chance, because once you glue it in, you're not going to be able to get in here. So we use our guiding lines to tell us where. I'm going to use my finger to feel that I'm pushing down gently and that it's against the glass. I'm going to use my favorite blue tape just to get this cable out of the way. And now, lining everything up, I'm going to take a peek. That looks good. And you want it to be the edges lined up with your box too. Okay, so that's where I want to be. I'm going to peek once more. Looks good. Okay, so now I take my hot glue and I'm just going to dab. Oh, try not to get any on the connector, because if you ever have to replace it, you want the connector free. So I'm going to just dab on the side. I'm actually just going to let it drop. Now, just to show you what the beam pattern looks like, usually you would have a tiny dot, but since we took the lens off, you'll notice that, can you see, I hope you can see this, that there's like a horizontal line. And let's look at the orientation. This package, remember you were pinching it like this, so use the circuit board as your orientation. The line is actually orthogonal at right angles to this to the line of the circuit board. So the circuit board's going vertical, and this line is going horizontal. And so I'm going to put this piece of paper on, and I'm just going to flip it 180 so you can see the lines. You see it's horizontal? We're going to take advantage of that. Let's imagine the image chip is, as I say, it's about 4 millimeters by 2. So let's say it's like that. What we're going to do is put the cap such that the beam is like this, and when we fire it up, we're going to slide the cap to find the orientation when the beam is overlapping the image chip. So we're going to then orient the board so that the hinge is orthogonal at right angles to the circuit board. Okay, that way the beam will be parallel to the hinge, and we can slide it up and down to align it. Let's attach the hinge to the cap. Notice that we got a cylinder meeting a flat, so it only meets in a line, but hot glue is going to save the day. So what's really important is that the hinge be at the right height. If it's up here, it's not going to hit the board very well. If it's too low, you'll have a gap where light will come in. So you want to have the hinge flush to the plane of the bottom of the cylinder. So to do that, I'm just going to use my just a card. You can use cardboard. You're going to get hot glue on it. That's why you want it to be something you can throw away. So I'm going to remember also you want the circuit board to be perpendicular to the hinge because the beam is perpendicular to the circuit board. So by orienting it this way, the circuit board perpendicular to the hinge, the beam will be parallel to the hinge. Okay, don't do that, do that. Okay, so we're going to put some hot glue on this, and then just a little bit just to tack it in place. Okay, and here we go. A little hot glue, just enough to tack it in place. And I'm gonna put it here. Make sure the orientation's right angles, and let it, oops, a little more, yeah, let it dry here. This is sort of like welding, same thing. You tack something and then you go back and finalize. Ooh, that wasn't a whole lot. I need a little more. A little more. Let's shove some in here. And shove some in here. Okay, that's more serious tacking. And now I'm going to orient it right. I'm holding the hinge with one finger and make sure it's right angles. Okay. Hot glue is kind of nice. It gives you a little time to fix your part, and it hardens pretty fast, so you don't have to hang out like 5 minutes with epoxy. So I'm just now letting it harden, and because I'm on a flat surface, both the hinge and the bottom of the cylinder of the cap are on the same flat surface, so they'll lay flat on the box when we get to that point. And notice the circuit board is at right angles to the hinge, and since the laser beam is right angles to the circuit board, the laser beam will be parallel to the hinge, so we can move it forward and backwards along the box to align the beam to the image chip. And we do that when it's live, when we're imaging it. Okay, it's hard enough that I can let go. And once it hardens, I'll fill in more glue, hot glue. The other thing is we have to then get this wire, we have to drill a hole in the box and get the wire into the box so we can hook it up to the Pi to get power for the LED. And we have to put the resistor in series. Now that that's hardened, I can fill in the blanks. I'm going to go in here. Try not to get hot glue on the moving part of the hinge, because then it'll freeze up. So there's a lot of gaps in here. I'm just gonna squeeze some in. Actually, yeah, this is ribbed, so I can travel down the ribs. That's one side, and let's see if I can rotate it while it's still, yeah, it's not walking out. Okay, and fill in these ribs. I can feel the hot glue is actually melting the tacking one. So I'm going to put it back down, get it oriented. I'm pushing on the hinge to make sure it's flush, because when I put the extra hot glue, it melted what I tacked. Okay, so now I'm pushing pretty hard down, and I'm also pushing the top half of the hinge into the cylinder, so everything is at right angles. We can make a hole so we can put the wires through the box into the box where the Raspberry Pi is to get power for the LED. So to do that, we can just coarsely locate the laser. Later on, once we fire it up, we'll move this to get the perfect alignment. But for the wire, we can just estimate it. What I'm going to do is just put this down here and mark where the center of the image chip is. And so I'm going to do it the same for the other side. I just don't want to mark my box. You could put blue tape on it too, but so there's the other one. So that just tells me where the center is, and so I can put this here and center it. Okay. And so now I'm going to push down on it, and with my X-Acto, what I want to do is, since the hinge is going to bend, I'm going to lay the wire on the side so the pivot point is here, so I can put the wire, the hole, I'll put it around here, so I'm going to scratch this. Okay, so now I know I'm going to drill my hole there. Two things about the hole. One is, notice I put it pretty far off. You want to clear this card. You don't want to drill through it because you might push it and break the silicone seal. The other thing is you want to take care of this glass. You want to protect it. So I'm going to put some, you guessed it, blue tape on top of this, just so we don't get stuff in it right now. So there's the mark I have for drilling the hole, and I'm just going to verify. Actually, you don't even need it on. I'm just going to verify that I'm clearing. Yep, I'm clearing it. I could go even a little more to the right. I'm clearing that card. Okay, so I actually want to go like around over here. That way I'm not going to drill through the card. Okay, I just drilled a hole, so it's going to basically go through here. I used a Dremel, and the wires go through here. And once we do the final assembly, I'll tack down the wire so it's nice and neat. But just right now, all I have to do is get it loose so that I can position this when it's on to align it, and then glue this down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the resistor to the first hole, and then hook the ground wire. Let's see, on this, the blue is the ground wire to the ground. So I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to make a right angle by holding on and bending it. See the right angle? And I'll cut this one, and I'm going to make a full loop. There's the loop. The reason I'm doing that is, see, this can drop right down there, and I can solder that. Okay, so you take your soldering iron, I clean the tip, I put a little solder on to wet it, then I put the wet part right on the circuit board. I hold it there, let the joint get hot, then feed solder onto that. Oops, let's See, now I have a bigger bead. I'm going to put that bead right on it. So it's thermally conductive. Now solders, I'm touching the joint, not the iron. You can see how hot it is. It's just flowing. That's beautiful. And then lift, let it cool by itself. And let's see, so that's the +5, that's the red, and it turns into green, so green is +5. We're going to use shrink tubing, so nothing shorts. Get some shrink tubing. We need big enough diameter so that it'll cover the resistor. That's perfect. Let's see. Hey, yo. And cut some tubing. And remember, you have to put the tubing over the wire before you solder it. Double check. We have red is positive. It goes to green. So green is positive. And I'm going to give it a little longer because wire heats up and it was a tight fit, so I don't want this to shrink prematurely. And I'm going to make a little loop by grabbing this. So I got another loop here. Loop meets loop. And to make it a little more secure, I'm going to use my tweezers. If I can find my tweezers. Well, I'll use these round nose pliers. And I'm just going to squeeze my loops. That'll help hold it while I solder it. The art of soldering, again, clean tip. I clean my tip. I put a little solder ball. So I have molten lead, which is conductive thermally. Oops, so I'm going to put it on this joint here. Let the heat conduct for a little while. Then feed solder into the joint. Not on the iron, but the joint. The joint should be hot enough that it melts, and it does. Let go, let it cool down. And you really want it to cool down. Don't put the shrink on it yet, because the shrink will start shrinking due to the hot joint. When it's cold enough, you want to slip it past the joint and onto the resistor. And now slide it over. Ooh, beautiful. There it is. That's what you want. Okay, I'm going to clean my iron because I don't want lead all over this. I'm going to put it in the corner here. Remember the corner? And I'm going to rub it, and it magically shrinks. Shrink tubing is great stuff. Before that, people used a lot of black tape, but this is a lot neater. And shrink it on the resistor too. That's great. Okay, the second one is ground. We're going to turn the right angle again. And the third one over is ground. Make sure it's not touching the neighbor. That's good. Okay, cool. Good. Let it cool. That's it. We now have the laser. The resistor limits the current because it's really a 3-volt laser, but this is a 5-volt supply, so the resistor limits the current. And so now every time the Raspberry Pi powers up, the laser will. But we have 2 more things to do. First, we have to put in the SD card. So this is already programmed with the operating system, and we loaded OpenCV on it too, which is really useful. It's a lot easier to insert the SD card when you have it in your hand. Okay, the contacts go towards the circuit board. Boop, and just press it in. And now, this is a really delicate operation. These connectors, see the black part? It's a wedge. You can pull it out just about 1 millimeter or 2. If you pull it out more than that, it will snap. And I haven't found a place to buy replacements, so you really ruin the whole board if you break that. So the key is to put your nail underneath the black and just wedge it ever so slightly. Don't force it. That's it. See, it just moved the tiniest a bit. Now I'm going to do it to the other side. Doing it without gloves is probably easier. So now I'm pulling them both out really carefully. and then I run my finger along to make sure they're both out. So now, see, it's loose. Okay, so what you do, again, the contacts, which are the gold, they go down. So you want to slide this cable between the black part and the green circuit board. So we can look at it on the side here. I'm going to push the black wedge up a little, and then this will insert just a little bit. See how little it inserts? Can you see that? So you want it to hit the stop and be flush, not a diagonal. You want both. You want it perfectly flush against the stop. You'll feel it when it stops. So here's the tricky part. So I'm going to anchor it back in these holes just so I have something to hold the circuit board. So I'm pushing it in with one hand, and I'm going to rub my finger along the top, evenly pushing in. So you're pressing the cable in with your right hand, and with your left nail, you're pushing that wedge back in. And you try and do it evenly, running to the right and left, right and left. Okay, so that was it. So now we can finally put this back, and we can put the screws on. Okay, so here's how we wire this up. We have 3 connectors, HDMI, USB, and power. So HDMI, USB, and power. Now these are all mini, so we need a lot of adapters. This is a mini HDMI to normal HDMI. So let's plug that in. And now you see why I had to make the thing so fat, because this guy's fat, or why I had to make this tall. This is the USB adapter. It is a mini USB to standard size. It has 4 USBs, and it even has a power switch. Not necessary, but pretty. That goes into the USB. And finally, power. It's not plugged in yet because you need to have the HDMI plugged into a monitor before you power it up. Otherwise, it won't discover it, and if you plug it in after it powers up, you won't get any signal and you'll wonder what's going on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is power it up, and I'm going to move this around till I get the image I like, and then I'm going to tack this down and then glue it down permanently, and then glue the cable in, and then we're done. Okay, the last step is to align the second to last step. The next step is to align the laser with the image sensor. So here's the laser. Not supposed to look at it, but the camera can look at it. That's the laser. That's the image sensor and the protective glass. And so we have the HDMI, the USB, and the power hooked up, and the Raspberry Pi operating system powered up. We launched the terminal, and now by typing raspivid times 0, that means it'll infinitely display what the camera sees. And now we can tell it's running because it's sensitive to light. That's good. So I'm going to dim this down a little. If I cover it completely, it's black. That's a good sign. No light's leaking anywhere. Okay, so now if we put the laser on top, we're going to align it so the hinge is the edge of the hinge is parallel to the edge of the case, and now we're going to slide it back and forth, and you can see. Let's start it from the very end. So that's, well, I'm going to center it, and I'm going to move it off from the center. So that's a pretty nice uniform field. Let me just tweak around. Yeah. It's bright over here and here and less dim here, but that's pretty good. So it's pretty tolerant. You can see I'm moving it about a half an inch, and you still, there's like a there's still a good range. So I'm going to pick right there. And so I'm just holding it down with my thumb. So this is lifting and dropping. That looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to hold it steady, take my trusty hot glue gun, and just, actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift the hinge. Okay, let me see. I'm going to lift it, align it again. I'm going to put hot glue underneath. Because if I tacked it down without putting it underneath, I'd never get glue underneath. Now I'm going to drop it. It's oozing out everywhere, which is fine. All right, so hot glue's a little forgiving. I'm going to just make a little tweaking of position. And that looks good. And so now I'm just going to clean up the edges a little. Now we just wait. Let's hold it until it hardens. I tried cleaning with alcohol the screen, so these are the alcohol drops that evaporated. This dot seems to be permanent. It might be underneath. Perhaps cleaning the glass with alcohol right before mounting it is a good idea. Okay, that's it for this. The final step, we glued this in place, so we have this working. Okay, and so now we just have to tuck in the wire. And we want to kind of lay this down so it's not stressed. So the wire they give you is kind of flimsy, so I'm thinking I can anchor this here, and then I have the thick wire, which will go down the front. Okay, so let's do that in steps. So I'm going to anchor this all on the head like that. So my trusty tape will hold this in place, and I'm going to do it with my tweezers. I'm going to hold this down and just tack this part first. And once that hardened, I'll do the rest. And then at the very end, we'll put the black silicone sealer on there. I'm going to move this a little closer in. Okay. Okay, so now we want to tuck this here. Put this on the side. Right in there. Makes it so it doesn't pivot much. Okay, so yeah, that's what I want, just like that. Okay, more glue. That's good. So you see how the pivot point of the hinge is here, so that this wire will just flex right there, and all this stuff is staying still. So that should last a long time. Once that hardens, I'm going to glue the rest and seal up that hole so no water gets through. It needs a little more time. I'll leave that free, and I'll just seal up that hole. Good. There we go. Now, if you really wanted to, you could bolt those in, but I like hot glue, it's fast. And so while that's hardening, so the rest of it is basically just snap it together. All these are tight, and I got my SD card in there, and everything works, so I'm just going to seal it up. It just snaps together.